Hey guys, welcome to FISHTORY. I'm Alexander Williamson, starting off my morning with a warm beverage out here. I like to just get a start outside. The birds are chirping, spring is on the way, and we're going to talk about buying fish online. So, should you buy fish online? Should you not? Well, let me say this right off the bat. Don't buy fish online if you don't have to. If you've got a good mom and pop shop, good prices, support them. Even if it's a little more than online, support them. They've got the same water as you. You can go back to them as a resource. And it's just great to keep your money in your own community, to keep it within the fish keeping community. Maybe if you need help or tips, or someone else needs help or tips, then you guys can build community and network. Now, today I want to go over some of the very common things that happen when you're buying fish online and things to look out for, kind of how it works and how it breaks down and where the issues are that you may not know about. Even if you've been buying fish online for years now, there are some bits and pieces of it that maybe people don't always see. For instance, you go to the big box store and you buy a $1 neon tetra. It's on sale, it's $1 or something like that crazy. Well, it seems like a good deal. You go to somewhere like Dan's Fish and they're $4.99 a fish. But where was it raised? Was it raised on a farm? Was it raised in water similar to yours? And most of all, Dan's Fish, yes, that fish is more expensive and you're going to have to pay shipping. Same with the Wet Spot or any number of places online you can buy fish. But if that fish is sick and it infects all your other fish, especially if you have anything rare or expensive or old, let alone anything you care about emotionally in your aquariums, those little dollar tetras can take all of it down. And soon your dollar fish becomes a $5, a $6, a $700 fish. It can infect your whole entire fish room. There are diseases that have spread in the hobby that are even airborne. And when you have someone doing quality control on imports and pumping the brakes and really looking at things carefully, this gets prevented. But in the 1980s, there was a virus that went through the fish keeping and fish farming community in Florida. It was actually an airborne disease that killed angelfish. So it's not unheard of. And when you're buying fish from every corner of the world, the most remote corners of the world are being imported and then all kept together, it's the perfect condition for something to go wrong. So the fish you get, you want to know where you're getting them and that you're getting them for somewhere quality. So let's talk about what those qualities you should look for are and explore this topic a little more. All right, let's get to talking about fish. Now, pardon the birds chirping. I like to get up early and get a nice start to the day. Now, the first thing you should know about buying fish online is don't. If you don't have to, don't. Go to a local fish club meeting. Get them from someone who's breeding them in your local water. If you can find the fish you want locally, do that because they're going to have the same water as you. Which brings me to another point, which is ask. You can always ask a retailer, what are your parameters? You know, what do you feed your fish? And a lot of retailers that are proactive, that are, ethical, that are really on the ball, places like Dan's Fish or Redfish Bluefish, people like this will actually get back to you right away, whether they're a sole proprietor or a big old organization. The Wet Spot. A lot of these places also have websites that will inform you in an about section of what parameters their water is. So do they have hard water? Do they have soft water? Do they acclimate everything to neutral water? These are all, somewhat important. They're all things that can be dealt with even if it doesn't match your water, but they're much more handy if they're acclimating to neutral and if they're quarantining. Now, mom and pop shops, they can quarantine as well, but let's talk about this for a minute about when fish are coming in from overseas, whether they're wild or they're bred on a big farm. If they're from a big farm, things like a lot of times, various tetras, rasboras, corridoras, things like that, it could be inside and in tanks. It could be outside in an area covered by tarps, in tanks and vats and ponds. Here in the United States, where I've gone and toured fish farms, which you can check out on the channel, you can see how they grow things like cichlids and, loaches and rasboras and all sorts of different fish, plecos for that matter, apistos. And you can see how they breed some indoors very specifically in controlled tanks that are small, and others they grow out in big ponds like guppies and platies and mollies, things like that. And so a lot of the cichlids as well can live out in a big pond, green terrors and red devils, things like that. So when they're doing that, any sort of bird, any sort of wind can blow in parasites and pests and bacteria and fungi, and that's just life. And so a lot of times farm fish might as well be wild fish to some degree. They have an exposure to whatever is going on. Also, they're on a farm with thousands of other fish, and any net that gets cross-contaminated, any splash of water, groundwater, runoff, all of that could be a vector for spreading things. And so when fish are being imported, it can be a really dirty business. Sometimes they're brought into facilities where every fish gets its own tank with its own supply of water, and that, in my mind, is the best way to do things. The Germans are phenomenal at this. However, a lot of times it's not like that. They may share 8 or 12 tanks and try to keep the same kind of fish in the same kind of water. But maybe they're actually putting fish in there, they drain the tank real quick, they refill it up, and 12 hours later, there's a whole different kind of fish in there. That's how we get really crazy diseases spreading around the hobby really quickly. So this goes on, and if you go to a big box retailer, those fish have come from one of those wholesalers like I was just talking about. So they get into their tanks, and a lot of times the whole system's connected. And so this fish that all of a sudden you thought was $1 Tetra at Petco or PetSmart might have a little white dot on it, or it might have nothing wrong with it at first, but then it starts kind of flickering and rubbing itself on stuff, which we call flashing in the hobby. All of a sudden, your $1 fish has cost you all the money of all the fish in your tank because it's infected it with something. So when people look at the cost of fish, to me, I don't see it as I'm just buying that fish. I see it as I'm buying that fish and unfortunately whatever parasites, whatever issues they have. And I want that to be as minimal as possible. Now, if you're breeding fish, whether that's for fun or for profit, or you're working on a project to breed a certain type of guppy color or a betta, that's when it's also really important to know where you're sourcing your fish. And if you're not buying it from someone like, Greg Sage of Select Aquatics, who does the green dragons and red dragon plecos and all that kind of stuff, or, Oddball Aquatics or Lucas Brett's Aquatics. If you're not buying it from a home breeder that sells online, you might be buying it from a place that does source from home breeders and things, but they have a selection of that plus imports. And that's kind of the middle ground where I like to shop from. So places like Aquatic Arts, Dan's Fish, and The Wet Spot, where they source both overseas and at home, and they're going to tell you where they source things. So I have links, like I said, to discounts below to every one of those that I have an affiliate link with. You can save 10 or 15% on some of them. But let's get back to the topic at hand. So you bring in these fish, and even if you have one pleco that's, say, a $50 or a $60 pleco, a green phantom or blue phantom pleco, a beautiful fish, and that's in your community tank, and you go to Petco and you buy some $3 Rasboras or Danios or something as a schooling fish, all of a sudden, if your pleco is sick and all your other tetras are sick, your rummy nose, your embers, whatever it is you have in the tank, your corridoras, soon you could have thousands of dollars add up. Not to mention, even if you do treat it, how much are you spending on medication? Now, a lot of places, I did a video on this very recently, but a lot of places will say, no matter what, please quarantine our fish. And I will say to that if you have a good enough source and you've used them many times, and you know that your tanks have nothing in them that is of issue, they've been running really well for 6 months to a year with no issues, and then you buy from them and you notice there's still no issues, that's when I'm really impressed. And a lot of times I won't quarantine. I'm just being honest. And it is that peace of mind that I am paying double for or triple for. If you count the shipping, a lot of people look at the shipping and they say, holy geez, that shipping is $60. Why would I pay that online? And, shipping is a big barrier for online shopping to a lot of people. They look at the price tag, and not only a lot of times are fish, when you see them online, like for instance, Aquatic Arts, they'll say, betta, $9.99, and you'll think, okay, that's an all right price for a betta. Then the next fish over might be a Corydorus, and it says $84, and you're like, holy geez, $84. Well, if you click the listing, a lot of times you'll see that's for 3 or 4 or 5 or a school of them, and they're selling them in lots. And that's true with plants. That's true with a lot of things in the aquarium business. And it's just a way to kind of upsell. And also, some of those fish should be in social groups. They're not happy if they're not. They're not healthy if they're not. And so a lot of what I consider ethical sources will make sure that their fish are sold in groups, or at the bare minimum, that they suggest that you buy a group in the description. A lot of people buy fish on impulse, and it's really important to do your research. And any of these sources that are willing to take your money should be willing to take your questions about water parameters, acclimation, or at least have a frequently asked questions page on their site that gives you some insight into that kind of stuff. But in my opinion, you should be able to email any one of these people that you're going to pay top dollar for and get information back. Now, as I said, it can be very expensive for shipping overnight. A lot of places have gotten so much pushback from consumers like us saying, hey, I only live one state over. Why can't you do UPS ground 1 day or 2 day or 3 day? I know it'll get here in 1 day if it's any of those services. And so a lot of websites now are allowing people to select that. But usually there are a bunch of disclaimers saying if you select anything other than overnight guaranteed insured shipping, you may lose your fish. And if it takes more than a day, that's on you. And a lot of people get really frustrated because they don't quite understand this, or when they click it, they think, well, it's no big deal, I live close. And at the end of the day, in my mind, it's always worth paying for the overnight, because that's usually where the DOA, or death upon arrival, guarantees are on these fish sites. A lot of times they will not guarantee things shipped slow, snail mail or ground mail, or whatever method that may take longer than overnight. Also, it's important to know that when you get your fish, immediately inspect them. Before you put them in the tank or anything, they may be colored down, they may be really stressed, they probably will be. But hold them up, get an LED flashlight, look at them, take pictures of them, even if they look healthy, take pictures of them. And then float them in the water, take pictures of them through the glass, in the bag, in the water, see how they're doing, make sure they're not sick, make sure there's nothing wrong with them. And then when you acclimate them, take pictures of them again later at night. It's always good to be able to look back at that and see if there was something going on. Maybe you'll notice later that, oh, they've got a red spot on their back. Was that there, or did that come in from shipping, or did that happen in my tank, And this is the kind of stuff where a lot of times you have to act in the first few hours, because as far as they know, and it's crazy the claims that I have friends who have shops have had to deal with, like people putting freshwater fish in saltwater tanks and claiming, well, it didn't say that it was a freshwater fish on your website.
Well, it didn't say that it was a freshwater fish on your website.
When that's all they sell. You ultimately are responsible for the fish you buy. So do your research, obviously. I mean, that seems like common sense. Now, another thing that I wanted to cover before we finish here is, are you buying fish for a community tank, or to breed for profit? If you are going to be breeding the fish, it is very important to have fish that are what they say they are. It is false advertising not to. And so a lot of times in this hobby, we have fish like, for instance, rainbow fish, where the collection point and the river they come from is very important. It could be the difference between a red fish and a blue fish as their predominant body color. And so people need to know that, so that when they order something, they get what they're ordering. And when you pay top dollar, you are going to usually get a top dollar service. And as long as you look into this, as long as they're transparent with their reviews, as I said, you can't always trust online reviews on things like Yelp or Google, because a lot of times people who've never ordered fish online, who aren't fish keepers long term, they're going to tell you the very worst experience that's ever happened, and it's going to be very biased. And the other people might be so new that they say it's amazing, and they don't really know what's going on, and 2 weeks later their tank crashed with Colmenares and some sort of giant parasitic infection that everyone caught. So I recommend talking to other fish keepers that look up to, trust, and that you think are well informed. Ask them where they get their stuff. And then try to find a deal. There's a lot of people like me on YouTube and other places that have discount codes, or you can sign up for a newsletter and get discount codes. Some places have sales, others don't. And I've noticed that a lot of the places that I like the most, Moonlight Aquatics and Dan's Fish, they don't really have sales very often, if at all. And it's because they're always bringing you fish at the lowest price they can that is, that works for their business. And when you're deciding if you're going to breed fish or not, and what kind, one, that you get the right fish, and two, that they're good fish that have a diverse genetics. If you can find out who was breeding them and what they were breeding them for, even better. Places like Dan's Fish oftentimes will say who the breeder was. Not only that it was bred in America, but that it was bred by so-and-so. And this really allows you then to go look that person up, contact that person, and if you're wanting to work with the genetics and maybe get a long fin gene or a certain color out of a fish, this is where online is really the way to go, because it connects 350 million people in our country to one another, whereas normally you've just got your town and whatever fish are around. So I hope that some of these tips and tricks are useful to you guys, and that you're also cautious about, what the terms and conditions are when you're buying fish online. It may seem kind of expensive to buy fish online sometimes, but it is nothing compared to the expense that you'll be paying if you buy bad fish and they harm your fish tank, let alone your fish room. Woo! Thank you guys, for starting off your morning with me. Now, I don't know if it's your morning, but it was my morning, and I couldn't think of a better way to start it off than to be spending some time with y'all. So, thank you so much, and if you find this information useful, helpful, or if you have more tips, tricks, helpful information, or retailers that you recommend, that you vetted, that you've gone through, and you think do a really good job at selling fish online, please put it down below in the comments. Always a great thing to have more information on the topic, and for people to be able to make up their own mind on what fits best for them. I couldn't do this channel if it wasn't for you guys, if it wasn't for the members, if it wasn't for you viewing, sharing, liking. So please keep doing those things. It means the world to me. And if I've earned it and you're not subscribed, I'd love it if you joined us. That's all I've got for you guys today, and I'll see you next time on FISHTORY. Bye guys.